This is part 3 of our series of surprising things in the Quran, and you guys just kept on asking for more and more parts. Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Leroy Kenton, and you're watching FTD Facts, brought to you from Self-Isolation Headquarters, aka my room. Now this video doesn't need any kind of introduction because you've seen part 1, you've seen part 2, but if you haven't already, I'll have the link to those below in the video description section. So let's just jump into this one. We got a lot more to talk about in this one. Coming up at number 10, we have anxiety. Now it says in the Quran that indeed mankind was created anxious. Now this is a lot of meaning that's put into it, and one of the most important meanings is that according to Muslims, Allah actually created humans for paradise but brought us to earth. And this means that humans are in an environment that is not actually normal for them. Therefore, humans go through a wide range of different emotions in this world. While there are positive emotions that humans feel, there are also emotions like anxiety as well as sadness that we experience. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. But coming up next at number 9, psychology. That's talked about in the Quran as well. Specifically in the Quran, Surah 5 verses 30, it says, "So that nafs, or self, of the other, latter one, encouraged him and made fair seeming to him the murder of his brother. He murdered him and became one of the losers." Now the Quran describes what's called the nafs, or the selves, as operating out of one of 3 states. There's the nafs al-amara, which is the commanding self. Then there's the nafs al-alawama, which is the accusatory self. And then thirdly, there's the nafs al-mutmena. That is the peaceful self. Now the Quran explains how these states actually command our psyche and tells us what to do. They control us, they dominate us, and now when our emotional needs are being poorly met, the nafs al-amara begins to control our feelings. But on top of that, the thoughts and the behaviors are also controlled by this as well. And the Quran provides guidance to learn and practice relaxation exercises to weaken the influence of the nafs, or selves. So there we see in the Quran, there's psychology mentioned there. Hope is another surprising thing that is mentioned in the Quran, and the Quran recognizes various types of hope. Specifically it says, "And they, the people of the book, said, none will enter paradise unless he be a Jew or a Christian. Those are their false hopes." And that's in the Quran, Surah 2 verses 111. Now there's a term called omniyatun, and those are hopes that lack practical basis in reality and have very little chance of actually becoming real. Sort of like wishful thinking. Then there's wad, and that's a hope of attaining something which is motivated by the love of a certain thing or a person. Now, it can have a positive connotation or a negative connotation based on the circumstances and the context. Like, for example, in the Quran, Surah 15 verses 2, it says, "Perhaps those who disbelieve will wish that they had been Muslim." So that's speaking of a type of hope in a negative connotation. So I also thought that this was pretty fascinating because, obviously hope is linked to religion, but hope being broken down into multiple types of hopes, I didn't expect to see that in the Quran, so that's what I included in this episode. Now, coming at number 7, we have affection and mercy, also stuff that are related to religion in general. But check this out. The Quran says this, "And of his signs is that he created for you from yourselves mates, that you may find tranquility in them. And he placed between you affection and mercy. Indeed, in that are signs for a people who give thought." And that's in the Quran, Surah 30 verses 21. So in this verse, we see God regards the creation of spouses as a sign. And in order to find peace and harmony between two of them, the verses say God himself placed affection and mercy between them so that they can live a life of tranquility. Now, the relationship between the spouses is based on affection and mercy. Another surprising thing mentioned in the Quran is sex. So sex has been openly recommended in the Quran. As a matter of fact, Surah 2 verses 222 says this, "When they," which is referring to the wives, "have cleansed themselves after menstruation, you go into them as Allah has commanded." Now, one thing to point out though is that the phrase commanded, it actually doesn't refer to a legislative command or anything like that. And what I mean by that, it's like it doesn't mean that as soon as somebody's wife becomes clean when she's off her period, that you need to immediately go and lay with her. No. But rather, it's referring to the sexual urges inside of human nature. Quran says God put those there, and you gotta use the urges as intended. So yeah, I'll just end that point there in an effort to just make this video as appropriate as possible. Definitely don't want to offend anyone or have this video get flagged on YouTube. But with that said, we made it to halfway in this episode, and just a reminder, if you're enjoying these videos so far, leave a like. It lets us know what FTD Facts episodes you want to see more of. And also, if this is your first time here to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring that bell to be notified of daily episodes. That's right, we post videos daily, so you can come back every single day to learn something new. Continuing at number 5, we have parents. As for the children, who are the fruits of their parents' love, inside of Islam, it lays down a comprehensive moral structure that enjoins parental responsibility and the child's duty to their parents. The Quran specifically says, "And treat your parents with kindness if one or both of them attain old age in your care. Never say to them a word suggesting disgust, nor reproach them, but address them with reverent speech. And humble yourself out of mercy before them and pray, 'My Lord, be merciful to them for having cared for me in my childhood.'" And you can find that in Surah 17 verses 23 onward. Also, do you know that equality is mentioned in the Quran? So yeah, one of the most misunderstood areas in Islam actually is the position of women in the religion. Now, the general perception in the West is that Muslim women are actually subjugated and almost seen as property to men. Now, while not all Muslims deal with women as inferior, this unfortunately is true in some parts of the Muslim world, and this treatment is supposedly justified by the religion. However, in the Quran itself, it states that men and women are equal. Period. In Surah 49 verses 13 it says, "O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female and made you peoples and tribes that you may know one another. Indeed the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Indeed Allah is all-knowing and acquainted." So in the Quran, there you go. Mankind is male, female, man, woman. Nobody's better, nobody's above anyone. Definitely men and women are different, we're made differently, but men don't own women, women don't own men. Number 3, we have the mention of patience. Now, patience is mentioned in the Quran in 90 places. Patience is made a condition of success and prosperity in the Quran, and specifically the Quran says, "O you who believe, persevere and endure and remain stationed and fear Allah that you may be successful." And that's found in the Quran, Surah 3 verses 200. So yeah, it's definitely true. In every area of your life that you are successful in, there is a state of patience that you need to go through first. Number 2 is actually the mention of humanity. So check this, the Quran places a lot of emphasis on the oneness of human beings and introduces the idea of common human origin and ancestry at 4 different places. And it says that humans actually have their origin in a single cell or soul. Now, to quote from the Quran, it says, "O mankind, reverence your guardian Lord who created you from a single soul, created of like nature, the mate, and from them twain scattered like seeds, countless men and women. Reverence Allah through whom you demand your mutual rights, and reverence the wombs that bore you, for Allah ever watches over you." And you can find that in Surah 4 verses 1. So that also kind of ties into the mention of equality of men and women as well. But either way, the last surprising thing that I want to share in this episode that's mentioned in the Quran is forgiveness. Now, forgiveness teaches a person patience and makes a person better for it, as well as stronger and more steadfast in their goals, because they don't care what life throws their way. Also, another interesting point is that forgiveness is an attribute that God uses the most generously, found in the Quran. Now, it's mentioned in the Quran in a number of places. Specifically, one verse says, "And let not those of virtue among you and wealth swear not to give aid to their relatives and the needy and the immigrants for the cause of Allah, and let them pardon and overlook. Would you not like that Allah should forgive you? And Allah is forgiving and merciful." And that's found in the Quran, Surah 24, verses 22. Alright guys, so that's all I have for you in this episode of 10 surprising things found in the Quran part 3. I know this episode had a little bit of a different flavor. There were just things that were mentioned in there that had like dual meanings and things like that, and I found it just interesting that they were mentioned in certain specific ways as well. So definitely, if you haven't seen part 1 and part 2, we dive a lot more into like the sciences and other interesting aspects of things mentioned in the Quran. Definitely recommend those episodes. Link to those are down below in the video description section. I'll also probably have one of them at the end screen of this episode. So once I get out of here, definitely check it out. And I'll see you guys next time in another episode. Stay awesome, stay educated. See you soon.